He started with self-help videos. He ended up believing that women are property. This is how young men fall into the manosphere and what it takes to get them out. I'm Fortesa Latifi. I'm a journalist. I've covered extremism and radicalization for places like Rolling Stone and Teen Vogue. This is based on a Teen Vogue story. Let's get into it. When Maisie first met Danny, he was the kind of guy who laughed easily, loved music, and spent weekends at jazz festivals. They fell in love. 4 years later, when she left him, he was convinced that feminism had ruined his life. He didn't think women should be able to vote, and he swore an allegiance to a diet of only chicken, rice, and broccoli. This isn't just one breakup story. This is about what happens when someone you love falls into the manosphere, and if there's any hope of getting them back. What is the manosphere? The manosphere is an online world of ultra right-wing influencers like Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines. They broadcast misogynistic, racist views that ascribe to an extremely conservative gender ideology. In the manosphere, there are a few absolute truths. Women are inherently worth less than men, and they need to be steered and manipulated into making appropriate choices. Real masculinity is in crisis, and only a return to strict gender roles will help solve it. And men are unfairly blamed for all of society's ills. The mascot for the manosphere, Andrew Tate, he believes that women belong in the home, that they are a man's property, and that they shouldn't be able to drive. An unknowable amount of young men are falling into the manosphere. This is happening through sites like Reddit, 4chan, and even YouTube. But once they fall down the rabbit hole of the manosphere, is there any getting them out? So I talked to Maisie, who was dating Danny, and she told me that the gateway for Danny was self-help. So it started innocently. There were videos from people like Jordan Peterson on how to clean your room and organize your life. But gradually the tone shifted. Danny started to believe that women were at fault for everything that was happening to him. He wanted to control who Maisie voted for, and he didn't think that women could handle working. So I talked to Cynthia Miller-Idris, who is a professor who studies extremism, and she told me that radicalization often wears the costume of self-improvement. And for Danny, that became a full wardrobe. So Dr. Miller-Idris said, on the surface, it's self-help, but then the tone changes. The blame for their issue gets placed squarely on women and feminism. And something that I really found through the reporting of this story is that I think that at the core of why young men are falling into the manosphere, a lot of it is loneliness. And the manosphere offers something that maybe their real life isn't offering, and that's a community. There's validation, there's a sense of belonging. And when life feels out of control, when your bills are piling up or your career is going nowhere, the manosphere tells you it's not your fault, it's feminism's fault, and it's the fact that men are not valued in the way that they should be. That's how Tom ended up in the manosphere. I talked to him for my story, and he told me that after leaving the army, he was lonely and overwhelmed. He was drawn in by manosphere influencers who claimed to care about things that he cared about, like high suicide rates and incarceration rates among men. So I talked to another professor, Pasha Dashgard, who also studies extremism, and he told me that this is a common entry point. So he said they start their conversations with men are in crisis and no one's talking about it. And Dr. Dashgard says, and that's true, men are in crisis and we should be talking about it. But what that opens up ideologically is the door for them to be like, and now here are the solutions, and it's horrible, toxic nonsense. So the horrible, toxic nonsense is the idea that women shouldn't be able to vote or drive or have jobs outside of the home. And that's how you're going to deal with all the problems that are facing men and facing society. Also, I just want to ask for a second, do you guys have anyone in your life who has fallen into this like manosphere world? And if so, I want to know what platform they went through. Like, was it Reddit? Was it 4chan? Was it YouTube? Was it, I'm sure, even TikTok? Like, I just want to know. So Tom tells me that after a few months in the manosphere, he realized that nobody was actually wanting to help him and that it was overrun by what he calls grifters, frauds, or some sort of religious zealots. He says they weren't offering answers, they were selling grifts, frauds, and fundamentalism. Tom did make it out, and I asked him now, would he call himself a feminist? And he says he wouldn't actively call himself a feminist, but it is part of his worldview. So that was pretty amazing to me that he went from being part of the manosphere to saying that feminism is part of his worldview. Like, that is quite the shift. But not everyone escapes so cleanly. So I also talked to Eddie. Eddie got pulled into the manosphere as a teenager through conspiracy theories, which are a very common gateway for people into the manosphere. So first, he got pulled in by Sandy Hook conspiracy theories, and then there was the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which is the belief that white people are being replaced by immigrants. In the message boards and forums he frequented, it was basically just accepted that men are superior to women. It felt like there was a secret truth that only I knew. He posted memes, he got pulled into the manosphere, but eventually, after a few years, he just started considering it cringe. And he said that he credits both growing up and just getting older, and also having his mom and sister, who are two strong female role models, as the way that he got out of the manosphere. He also realized something critical, that these beliefs weren't helping him, they were isolating him. If Eddie could help other families get their sons and brothers out of the manosphere, he said that he would tell them to support them through it. He says, if at any point someone had come to me and was like, you're a horrible person, you're a shit human being, you shouldn't be thinking these things that I viewed as objectively true at the time, I think that would have shoved me further away. And research actually backs him up. Research shows that shame doesn't work. Empathy is the thing that pulls people out of conspiratorial and radicalized thinking. It also helps to point out that this whole movement could basically be considered a grift, like everything is for sale. And these influencers are profiting off the pain that they're claiming to heal. Men like Tom and Eddie escaped the manosphere. And then there's Danny, who is still enmeshed in that world. There's another class of manosphere participants, and that is really shown by someone named Frank, who I also talked to. So I found Frank through a Reddit post in which he described his awakening out of the manosphere during Black Lives Matter protests. He said a switch flipped and he realized, quote, Black people were right all along. So Frank says that he left the manosphere. I reached out to him for an interview. I interviewed him, and during our conversation, it didn't seem like he had left the manosphere as much as he thought he had. Frank still talked about being too concerned with consent and the idea that it's okay to use a little force of will, which I honestly found really disturbing. And he said that he had moved on from the manosphere and made this Reddit post that did really well and got, thousands of comments and upvotes and whatever. And then when I talked to him, he was still spouting these manosphere ideas. So that bummed me out. Some, like Eddie and Tom, find their way out. And then there's Danny, who Maisie says she's grieving like he died. Others stay or linger in the in-between, like Frank. But one thing is clear, the manosphere is more than just a passing trend, and it's changing people's lives forever. If there's any hope in this story, it's that people can come back from the brink of conspiratorial and radicalized thinking. But it won't be through shame. It's through empathy and accountability and helping them see that the truth that they're being sold is really just a lie with a price tag. If you're interested in more stories that deep dive into the world of online culture, just subscribe and make sure that you hit the notification button so that you don't miss my next story and my next video.